I get this email from Representative Chris Stewart's office saying Chris has had extensive briefings on the tunnel monitoring project, cartel activity, and subsequent national threats to various assets, but he can't talk anymore about that. And so I sent this. Jim Jordan's office immediately gets back to me and says, oh, we want to see that letter from Chris Stewart's office right away, right? So I sent it immediately. And then about 2 months later, Chris Stewart resigns from Congress saying that his wife had some sort of illness or something like that.
Wow, interesting.
I didn't know that's why.
Yes. And so I'm claiming, without much proof, except it was about 2 months. That's the key thing. I submit this to Jim Jordan, and as soon as I give this to Jim Jordan's office, all of my contacts with Jim Jordan just cease. He disappears. Representative Chris Stewart, he won't talk to me anymore, right? And then he resigns from Congress. So
it looks like Chris gave you more information than what was necessary for their handlers to.
Exactly.
And so they said, wrap this up.
You know, the way they look at it, he made a very serious mistake. I don't know if that's a felony, but that certainly is against the rules of the House Intel Committee to divulge such highly classified information about atomic bomb attacks on the United States.
And the tunnels.
And the tunnels. He says he's actually been to the tunnels. He's had extensive briefings about, and when we were there talking to him, yes, he knew all about the tunnels. And he knew that they were looking for the atomic bombs. He knows all about this. I can't get NPR to go and talk to him, right?
I think this is why the people are fed up with our government.
Exactly.
I mean, it's very clear that these people at all levels,
Exactly.
you know, especially here in Utah, are not working for the people.
Chris Stewart, repent, come forward and tell the American people what's going on, what you've been doing, what's going on in the Intel Committee, right? This is your nation. These are your children.
And welcome back to We Are the People Radio. This is your host, Jason Preston. And again, with my long-lost friend, Tom Hasleton. How you doing, brother?
Good, buddy. How are you today?
Good. It's been a few minutes.
Oh, it's good to be back here. Always a pleasure.
Well, people love you, and we're grateful to have you back. You do a great job, and this is one I really want to have Tom on because Tom's really good with this type of particular stuff. He's got a great mind for it. So today's show. We have a whistleblower that I think you're going to be very interested in. This is a whistleblower who's gone to the likes of almost every single one of your reps who has ignored him. He's been to federal reps, he's been to the FBI, and he's going to get into his story. And it has to do directly with something that should be an issue to all of us. We've had well over 600 deaths a year due to drugs that are coming from the Mexico border. Our guest today is going to break down to you what is happening at the border, how this is coming through, how it appears the FBI, the CIA are aware of this and allowing it to happen. And so we're going to jump into that. And I think it's going to blow your mind. When this story came to us, we were like, you're kidding me. And especially the fact that all of your representatives have turned a blind eye to this and apparently are not interested in getting in stopping this. So, this is why we do this. What has got this country turned around was not the Republican Party. It was not the mainstream media. It was the offbeat, podcaster like Joe Rogan and regular people like us who have been trying to get information, citizen journalists that the regular media, KSL, Desert News, refuse to put out there because they are controlled. Why does this matter? Because right now we're in a lawsuit where they are threatening to take us down, threatening to silence us, to stop us from getting this type of content out. So, this is a fight for everybody who believes in citizen journalism, everyone who is trying to fight against the machine which has been destroying this country. They take down channels. We have been dealing with this since the beginning. So thank you guys for fighting with us. And please make sure you follow us on our website, wearethepeople.org. You guys have been signing up like wildfire. It's great. If you're not getting our emails, check your spam because they're probably there. But thank you guys for your support there. And you know what's awesome? We've been trying to raise money for this lawsuit. And we've got you guys just coming on and saying, you know what, we love the billboards. We want to keep them going. I got Timothy LeBlue. who decided, hey, I want to make sure you guys are still having funding to put these shows on because it costs money. Shout out to Timothy. Thank you for sponsoring this, and thank all of you for the support. Now, I don't want to take too much time. Tom, we're glad to have you back. This show was actually, I have to make one introduction before we introduce our main guest, and that's Sophie Anderson. For most of you, she doesn't need an introduction. She has been leading this fight in so many ways for so many years. You probably know her as one of the Red Pills. She's been involved in fighting for election integrity. She was integral to Phil Lyman's campaign and helping behind the scenes drive that successful machine forward. Sophie, we're glad to have you. This is actually Sophie's father who's going to be presenting, and Tom's going to introduce him. But Sophie's one of these people we all owe a debt of gratitude for her fight for freedom in this state. So with that being said, Tom, would you mind introducing our guest, who is Sophie's father?
Absolutely. Obviously, we've got to do an introduction here because people need to understand the validity of who the guest is and why it's important to have him on here today and what he's going to tell us. Again, thank you, Sophie, for standing up and speaking out. So, without further ado, Byron Arnason. I hope I'm pronouncing the last name correctly.
Perfectly.
Awesome. He's a physicist, a geophysicist with extensive electrical engineering expertise, chief engineer for L&R Instruments, also president of Jumbo Nevada, Inc., a mineral exploration company. He holds a BS in physics and an MS, I assume master's in exploration geophysics, both from Stanford Junior University. Held technical and management employment positions at Trans World Airlines, Texaco Oil Company, Mobil Oil, Geotronics Corp, ASOMA, Instruments, XRF. Sounds like a lot of companies here.
Yeah.
Lacoste, Romberg Gravity Meter Company, and he also holds a first-class radio telephone license with Ship Radar endorsement. He's even got the license number behind it.
That's an SAC license, by the way.
Right?
Yeah.
That's a big deal. Co-inventor of United States Patent 4792761. You can go look it up. Geophysical prospecting with collimated magneto. Is it
Magneto.
Magneto.
Telluric.
These are words that are
this
beyond
guy
my
is smart.
description, right?
I think he's saying where you see he's a smart dude.
Telluric. Okay, that's a new one for me as well. Fields. Collimated, is that how you say it? Collimated, magneto, telluric fields.
Very good.
Wow, that's a mouthful. Peer-reviewed publications include, he's got some properties of geophysical fields and their effects on elephants and other animals. He's got seismic properties of elephant vocalizations. It's actually pretty cool. Closure of the elephant ear canal by skeletal muscles, implications for acoustic and seismic reception. And there's a few other things that we can go on. And then he also is very involved with our local rep here, Chris Stewart, and sending emails and contact in regards to what we're going to speak on today. So, Byron, thanks for being on the show today, and welcome to We Are the People.
Thank you very much, Tom. I appreciate that. And Jason, thank you for inviting me here. And it's a thrill to be here. I appreciate it greatly. And maybe I should take it from that point where, as shown here, I'm walking on Antelope Island with that big white tube. And that tube measures various geophysical aspects of the Earth. And that particular photo was designed mostly for marketing, but it does have an application of finding deep tunnels. And that was back in 2006, 2005. We had recently developed that with my boss, whose name was John David Fett. John David Fett. This was my boss, a very dear friend. And he had worked as I call it a spook, an intel agent, and I'm guessing at about 40 years. Very well known within the geophysical community. So he worked, and he told me, Byron, I'll never be able to tell you which intelligence agency I work for, but I've participated in the toppling of Allende in Chile. I participated in monitoring the Ho Chi Minh Trail during the Vietnam War. He was involved in actually recording the above-ground nuclear test in Nevada, way back in the 1960s. He had done lots of intelligence work for various intelligence agencies. And I had assumed that he had done that on a simple contract basis. It wasn't until just many months before he died that, and he died of essentially of Parkinson's disease. He actually died of a heart attack, but he was going downhill with Parkinson's. And he revealed to me that he had worked all these decades with the intelligence agencies. And near the end of his life, he would invite me to his 5-story mansion on the shore of Lake Tahoe. It reminded me of The Godfather, where you have those Lake Tahoe scenes. That's the kind of mansion he had right on the shore of Lake Tahoe. And as I was there, he would regularly get calls from the Pentagon. He was really well tied in with the Pentagon and the intelligence agencies. And we had been developing instruments like that. Let me close this. Before I go on, he was also the owner and manager of Lacoste and Romberg gravity meters. And gravity meters probably don't mean anything to almost everybody that I'm addressing, but gravity meters probably won most of World War II for us. Why? Because they found the oil. Where did most of the oil for the Allies come from? From Texas and Oklahoma. How did they find that oil? They used LNR, Lacoste and Romberg gravity meters, to find these structures, salt domes, that contain most of the oil that we shipped over to our allies. So this instrument, as obscure as it is, was absolutely crucial for us to win World War II. Very, very, very important instrument. And we are Lacoste and Romberg. That company was formed by 2 physicists from the University of Texas at Austin. They patented something called a zero-length spring, and they kept that patent alive for close to 50 years. And then John Fett bought that company from the 2 physicists that had written that patent. And then he continued developing the instrument. Later on, he brought me in as an employee to Lacoste and Romberg gravity meters, so I had a pretty good grounding in gravity meters. There are 2 of Lacoste and Romberg gravity meters on the moon that they left there. So these are very sophisticated instruments. At the time, they are the most precise mechanical instruments ever built.
So, Byron, tell us how your story ties in at the border. Where this...
Yeah. So, John Fett sold this company, Lacoste and Romberg gravity meters, that's known by every geophysicist around the world, particularly the communists, because they always wanted to buy these. He sold it to a group, and I think he got about $16 or $17 million for it, and he wanted to retire. He had Parkinson's, and his wife also had Parkinson's disease. He bought this mansion on the shore of Lake Tahoe, and I asked if he could take me with him. I pleaded with him because I thought so highly of him and I wanted to work for him. And thank goodness he took me with him. And we were developing new instruments. So this L&R instruments that I'm presently the chief engineer of is a continuation of Lacoste and Romberg. So we ship, we've made about 400 instruments that we ship around the world, mostly used to locate water in Africa and Central America, also used for grounding safety on wind towers in the United States, in Texas and New Mexico. So every time you build a wind tower, those towers have to be safety tested, and our instruments are used for that safety testing, so people don't get electrocuted, and that a lightning strike can hit that tower without destroying the tower. And when he sold that instrument and he took me with him, we were working on these other instruments, and one day I get a call from him and say, Byron, all of these instruments we're working on presently, he said, wrap that up and don't charge me another penny for any of that work. Close it up, organize it. Tomorrow we're going to start on a very important and immediate need by the FBI and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And I had no clue about what he was talking about, but he set up a meeting for me to go, and I flew down to El Paso. I assumed that I would be meeting with a technical firm to discuss whatever purpose the FBI and the Army had for having a gravity meter. And I didn't really know it was specifically about tunnels. But when I got to El Paso, I met with the Army, and they drive me into Fort Bliss. Fort Bliss is the second largest, in some ways it's the largest military base in the United States. By other means, it's the second largest. It's an enormous base. And I'm picked up by these Army guys, and they drive me into the base, and I go through the very first guard gate, and they take down all of my identification. It takes about 15 minutes. I notice the guards phone someone to get approval for me and my other engineers to go through. We go through the first gate, come to the second, and they assign us a Jeep. We go to a second gate, and the guards come out, they get our information, write it down, they phone someone, that someone allows us to go through, we follow the Jeep, we come to a third gate. The third gate has these massive blocks of concrete, 50 caliber machine gun barrels aimed at us, very serious looking guards with only one road going in and out. And they told us to stay off to the side, took our identification, very professional, very polite. Again, they phoned someone, and this time it took much longer. They came back, okay, you've been approved to proceed in. So we proceeded in after driving miles into Fort Bliss. Fort Bliss is just so enormous. And this last gate had this enormous fence with 3 circular wires of concertina wire on both sides of the fence, and then they had concertina wire on top of the fence. And I had not signed up for that. I'd never gone to a military reservation like that. I didn't have any military clearance. I'd never been in the military. I didn't know what was going on, and my boss had not clued me in on this. So when we drive in, there's a large parking area, and there's a few big buildings, but the biggest of this is maybe 150 feet long, and it's maybe 40 feet wide, and there's no windows on it. And there's only, from what I can tell, only one door. The door is open, and there's a high-ranking military officer there waiting for us. There were about maybe 45 of us total in the meeting. I represented the geophysical aspect, developing this instrument that hopefully can find deep tunnels. And as I proceeded in and followed everybody else in, this high-ranking, he was the only Army officer there in uniform, and he told me, Mr. Arneson, you are entering a skiff. And he said, maybe you're not familiar with the rules, but you will be handed some material in this building, and we will give you some information, but whatever information we give you, you must hand that back to us before you leave the building, or you can be charged with a very severe felony. I said, I understand. He made it very clear. He said, don't take anything out of this building. And so we go inside that building. Again, there are no windows. There's a conference table that's maybe 70 feet long. And I find out that this is called a skiff, a secure compartmentalized information facility is what it stands for. Kind of long name. But you'll probably have heard that term because when the congressmen are talking about very important national security issues, Charles Grassley will say, well, we can't talk about that here. We need to go into a skiff in order to talk about nuclear weapons or dirty bombs or these highly sensitive national security secrets. So for us to have even those technical meetings in Fort Bliss, we had to have them in a skiff. And when I was in there, one of the engineers that was with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers mentioned to me that when the President of the United States visits Fort Bliss, he goes to that particular skiff because apparently it's the most secure skiff on all of Fort Bliss, according to that engineer. So in this meeting, there are 5 FBI, again, there's about 45 people there. There are people from ATF. There are people from Border Patrol. There's people from, what are the other border, ICE. There are ICE and customs and all of these people related to the border. Some of them are in uniform, some of them aren't, but there's these 5 FBI guys. And on the side of me were people from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, an engineer, a civil engineer, as I recall, and also a geologist. And as I recall, they were from the ERDC branch of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is an extremely powerful and rich organization. So they build, they have contracts that are multi-billion dollars. And here I am in this office talking to these guys about something I don't know anything about. They're wanting something to do with tunnels. So the 5 FBI agents get up and they start talking about tunnels. And as they're showing these films and photos of various tunnels, I open up my business cards and try to exchange cards with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the engineer, the civil engineer, and the geologist. We exchange cards. I learn their names and their titles and their contact information. And then I ask the 5 FBI guys, "Oh, can we exchange cards?" And they say, "I'm sorry, Mr. Arneson, we are not allowed to divulge our true identities or our contact information."
You're in the big time.
Yeah, and I was not set up for any of this. I didn't expect any of this. And I'm going like, none of this makes any sense to me. I like, what's going on here? I thought I'd go to a regular building like I normally do on my commercial visits, and I meet with engineers and they say, we want to measure the salt content in soil, or measure the safety of a grounding of a transmission line or something like that. And here I come in and they say, "Look, Mr. Arneson, we have many tunnels along the border that were built by the Mexican drug cartels. The FBI, in collaboration with the U.S. Army, monitors those tunnels, and we allow contraband to pass unimpeded through those tunnels. The problem is that these tunnels have been getting deeper and deeper, and our present technology cannot map these deep tunnels. And we know John Fett, and we know of your expertise. There is no other company in the United States that has the technology that you have advanced. There may be some from other companies, but the FBI is prohibited from even trying to bring them in because it's a national security issue. So we were brought in because we were Americans, and also because John Fett, my boss, had these long-term, well, he was an intelligence agent for decades. So they had trust in him. So they say, what we want you to do is we need to advance the art of detecting deep tunnels, because he said, we are already monitoring these several tunnels, but we know there are more tunnels because we see the contraband that are coming from these additional tunnels. And I said, well, what kind of depths are we talking about? And he said, well, we can see almost to about 100 feet, but the newer tunnels are deeper than 100 feet, but shallower than 200. I said, well, that's something that we can probably deal with. And so my job was to get these details and try to figure out whether we could actually develop something that would work over those depths.
So you didn't have anything at the current time that would reach that.
No.
But you had obviously have the ability with your technology to potentially develop something like that.
Very good.
For these, what's interesting to me, I've known about tunnels for a long, long time. And tunnels have always been like this conspiracy, at least amongst, all the regular people, right? There are tunnels under Salt Lake City that are known that lead from the temple into, different quarters, living quarters, or different areas, secure tunnels. There's tunnels under D.C. There are subways.
I've been in them, Tom.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. And there are tunnels that have existed around the world. There are underground cities. And what's interesting is during COVID, a lot of this was exposed to this underground network of tunnels and contraband and human trafficking and other things that are taking place in these tunnels. what's great about today is that we have somebody that has helped develop product or a type of material that will actually see what's in there, map them out properly. Someone that's been and seen with the FBI, the military, that type of thing. To me, it's fascinating because it brings a lot of these conspiracies and puts them to rest. I think we're like 100-0 for conspiracy theorists.
So I am behind the curtain. The people that I talk to are the FBI agents, even though they won't give me their names, they won't give me their contact information. Right. But when I was behind that curtain, everything we talked about was atomic bombs, right? And dirty bombs. And how are they going to get past through those tunnels? What is our capability of detecting them? All of these kind of issues. We talked about that all of the time. Of course, you look at the local news and you never hear the word atomic bomb. No. And the greatest risk to our nation are atomic bombs that are flowing into northern Mexico from the northern Mexican drug cartels.
You're saying the atomic bombs are going from the United States into Mexico?
No.
From Mexico into the United States.
Tunnels.
So, first of all, I tell the FBI agents, look, I'd really like to do this job. It's well paying. My boss would like it. He's done these kind of surreptitious jobs before. He feels comfortable with it, and I'd really like to do it. But I said, let me be honest with you. I don't believe any of this. You guys have tunnels that you guys are monitoring, and you let drugs and you let contraband flow freely through these tunnels. I said, I'm happy. I'll be very
just
happy.
like everybody else.
Yeah, I said that's crazy.
Very thought right there is
that's
exactly
crazy.
how everyone else thinks.
That's crazy. The FBI having open tunnels, openly violating the law, allowing explosives. ATF was in the meeting. They're hearing this, right? And I'm looking over at ATF like, hey, what do you guys get? And they just accepted like they already knew about it, apparently. Right?
So borders, they have these tunnels, and what you're saying is they don't care if it's drugs. They don't care if it's contraband. They don't care if it's human trafficking. They only care if it's a bomb, atomic bombs. Is that correct?
Well, so I present my case. I'm happy to do this. I will do it. But just to be honest with you guys, come on. FBI allowing drugs and everything, and guns and everything, explosives to come through tunnels. Don't give me that malarkey. I'll be happy to do it, and you pay us, and we'll build it. We'll try to build an instrument that can reach down to 200 feet. And they pleaded with it, saying, well, Mr. Arneson, this is really true. I said, no, this is just an empire-building activity of the FBI. So please don't treat me like I'm a baby, right? And that's when the very last day that we had our technical meetings in that skiff, this lone Army officer who never said a word during the entire meetings. And I wait for everybody to leave the skiff, and I go up to him and I say, look, my name is Byron Arnason. I'm the leader for the instrument development to look for these tunnels. And he looked at me, and he was in fatigues, I think. And he said, Mr. Arneson, we know exactly who you are. And because I hadn't received any focus that I knew of, and he said, we know exactly who you are. And I said, look, these FBI guys, I don't believe these guys for a second about this atomic bomb threat and open tunnels. And he looked at me and said, Mr. Arneson, please believe me, this is the greatest threat to our nation. And all it would take is one atomic bomb, yet they can bring several. And the hair on the back of my neck stood up. He impressed me. And from that point on, I believed it. I really believed it. So we took on that job, and when I presented and I discussed this with the FBI agents, I said, "Are you telling me that you let everything come through those tunnels?" And they say, "Well, Mr. Arneson, they don't do human trafficking. It doesn't pay well enough. So they're looking for a big return on investment because these tunnels cost millions or tens of millions of dollars to build. They're not shallow. They're not dug by hand. They have the very best civil engineers from Mexico that are building these tunnels.
Wow.
And what they do is they kidnap the Mexican civil engineers' families and they hold them for ransom. They tell the civil engineers, you will build these tunnels or else. But if you build them, then we'll let you go and we'll pay you a big bunch of money. And the FBI agents told me, from what we know, they kill everybody after the tunnel's built. They cannot afford to allow the location of these tunnels to be known by anybody.
It reminds me of that show, with Breaking Bad with Walter White, and he has to build a new facility, right? And so the Mexican mob guy hires these guys out of Germany or wherever, out of Scandinavia somewhere, these great engineers to come in and build this underground bunker facility where they can cook their meth. And same thing, they try to kill them afterwards, so they don't know where anything is.
So, I mean, that's what the FBI told me, that as soon as they're finished, they wipe them out. And there's several that's happened to. And so I continue working on this. I'm the lead guy. I have several engineers working under me developing an instrument. And this device that you see here is about 12 feet long. The instrument we actually developed for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, which they bought, is a little over 18 feet long. And up in the front, if you look at the very front up here, there's on the existing unit that is presently in Gaza, is a 500-watt transmitter. So this thing is about a half a watt transmitter, to give you an idea. So what we built for the Army was state-of-the-art, the very best equipment you could possibly get at that time. And this is about 2012 or so, 2011, something like that.
The question I have is, these tunnels, how many are there, do you know of? Where are they located approximately, and how far into the United States do they come in? And do they come up in a warehouse? Do they come up out of some bunker? Where do they come? I'm just curious how this all works, just for the general public, because I've always wondered, like, where do these tunnels go, and how far into the United States are they going?
Excellent questions, and some of those questions I cannot answer. I could never take anything written out of those skiffs, right? I was shown photos of the inside of those tunnels, and they're very well built. At the time, and this is 2007.
Not like a dirt tunnel, is it?
No.
It's like a complete highway type of system.
All of the tunnels that I saw, the photos that the FBI showed me, they all had railway systems in
Wow.
it. You don't have people walking with bags of marijuana on their back. This is high value. This is big return on investment. These people are businessmen.
These are actually, it's like an underground
and
subway.
They don't do human trafficking, because human trafficking doesn't pay enough.
I don't believe you.
Pardon?
I don't believe you.
You don't believe me?
I don't believe that at all.
Okay.
I don't believe that narrative.
See, if you look at human and moving a human from one end of the tunnel and getting them down, so you have an escalator or an elevator device on one side of the border that takes you down to about 120 feet. Then you've got to route that person about a mile over to the other side of the border. Then you've got to raise him up, and then you've got to get him out of there. And for the few $1,000s you can get for that guy, if you get the same amount of fentanyl, you can get over $1 million. So if you've got a very high value person, yes, maybe. But the FBI told me, no, they don't use these tunnels for human trafficking. This has to be really high, very high return on investment. And that meant at the time heroin and fentanyl and maybe dirty bomb material, because at the time the ISIS and these Middle Eastern terrorist groups, when they would go into a city, the very first thing they would attack would be the medical facilities, and they get the cobalt-60 and the cesium-137. These are the dirty bomb materials that you just spread over a city, and everybody has to leave the city for 5 or 10 years. It's unlivable. And they said that dirty bomb material and the price that they're willing to pay is astronomical. So what their main purpose is to flow drugs and high-value drugs, not marijuana, high-value drugs like fentanyl and cocaine and the high-value stuff. And then also the FBI told me at the time they were negotiating the price of bringing dirty bomb material, and actual atomic bomb components. And the FBI told me that the Middle Eastern terrorists would not bring the bombs in as a single unit. They bring them in parts, so it'd be harder to identify if they're stopped on the ocean, for example. And they suggested that these atomic bombs, they wouldn't come from China or Russia or even possibly North Korea. They would probably come from a rogue state like possibly Iran or more than likely Pakistan.
Right, I'm sure.
Because Pakistan, according to John Bolton today, has about 200 atomic bombs. Pakistan doesn't necessarily love us, and if someone comes up with a few tens of millions of dollars, those military officers, how many atomic bombs do you want to buy? How many millions of dollars do you have?
Tell us about, because I know when we talked earlier, you talked about Israel.
Yes.
And these tunnels. Talk to our viewers and listeners about what you saw as a threat and some of the things in what you understood about that and some of the alarms you raised that went unheeded.
Can I just try to wrap up with Tom's question?
Yeah.
These are real important questions. So the depth of these tunnels was running from 100 to 200 feet. At the time, 2007, they said that the longest tunnels were just short of a mile, and they were always in commercial areas, in cities. They wouldn't have them rurally, and they would always come up in the middle of a large industrial building that would be rented out for rooms, and they would get a long-term lease on the inside of that building, and they would somehow bring equipment in, and they drill straight down for about 150 feet and then go horizontal. And it had to go like that because they all had water problems along our U.S. Mexican border. So you had to have pumps to continually evacuate the water. You had to put in the railway tracks. You had lighting systems. You had ventilation systems all over that full mile, right? And you've got the railway systems going also, very sophisticated. And again, I didn't have any photos of those. The FBI never showed me where they were. They never took me.
Probably a good thing for you.
Yes, yeah. I didn't want to know.
The point that I want to make with what Jason had said earlier, real quick, and then let's get into that Israel is I think that you're obviously you got to have a big return on investment with these. I understand that with whether it's both the United States and Mexico, however they're doing that is true. But there are things that money don't buy that these people want, and that's the human trafficking. Okay, and it's not an ROI. There's something else that they're after with that, and we can go into that another time. And that's the thing that you need to understand with these types of people and organizations, that human trafficking happens regardless, and it may not be through that particular tunnel or some of these, but they are human trafficking through these tunnels because that's a safe way for them to get through. There are millions and millions of people that are trafficked every single year. And the one thing that a millionaire, a billionaire, whatever these people, whoever does this, for whatever reasons they do, which are all nefarious, is that it's something that money can't buy. And that's what they want. And that's the difference here, and that's the point that I want to make through this. So I know that stuff has to be happening regardless, whether they're telling you that or not. And now the big money are the bombs and the other things that they're bringing through these tunnels. I would agree with you 100% on that. There's probably a lot that they didn't tell you.
Yeah.
I would agree.
Oh, absolutely. Whatever I did get out of them, I had to pull out of them, right? They didn't want to tell me they have these tunnels open. That was a big decision to actually tell me that these tunnels, the FBI protects these tunnels. They make sure that they run. They never give any information to local law enforcement. And I asked, that's how this started out. I asked the FBI guys, hey, if this is such a big deal, why don't you bring in the Texas National Guard or the Texas Rangers or the local sheriff for this county, right? Yeah. And they say, no, if we do that, they ruin our project, because if they find they find these tunnels sometime by accident, a sheriff, and they'll come in and destroy the tunnels. That ruins our project. So no, we never share any information with local law enforcement. I said, oh, now I'm getting it. And you could be totally right. I am only regurgitating to you what the FBI told me. So what actually comes through those tunnels, I never saw what came through those tunnels.
I think the public has become more and more aware that we also have these same government agencies funding wars and funding terrorists. Exactly. And so the fact that that they want these tunnels open, I have a feeling is not in our best interest in every
absolutely.
circumstances.
And now if I can transition into Jason's question.
Yes.
And to do that, I'd like to start with Representative Chris Stewart. So as Jason had mentioned, I phoned everybody. I phoned Mike Lee. I phoned Ted Cruz. You name it. I phoned them, right? And I said, look, I worked for the FBI. I was the lead on developing instrumentation to find tunnels. And this is what the FBI is doing. And they're allowing these drugs to come through to kill all those Texans down there for Ted Cruz. And I said, well, help me, Ted, right? Well, they never put me on the phone with Ted, right? And I phoned Mike Lee. I phoned year after year to Mike Lee's. They would never allow me to talk to Mike Lee. So I phoned all the reps. And who's the only guy that offers to meet with me? Representative Chris Stewart. So, and I explained my situation with him and asked if he's willing to meet. Finally, he agrees to meet with me. I go up there, and he's on the Intel committee, so he's in the know. Most of these other reps, they don't know anything about this, right? It's compartmentalized information when it comes to atomic bomb attacks, right? But he's on the Intel committee. So we go up and visit him. We have about an hour-long meeting. I explained what I'm seeing, and I said, and I mentioned to Chris, please help us stop the flow of these deadly drugs into Utah. Every year we have about 600 Utahns, parents that lose their children to these drugs, and the FBI is in charge of protecting these drug flows. And the Governor Cox, is aware of it, and the Attorney General, Reyes, he's aware of it. How do I know they're aware of it? Because I've given them the exact details with the names, the dates, the locations, all of the details you have here, and pleaded with Governor Cox, please investigate this FBI, these vile crimes, murders that are being protected by the FBI.
For our listeners, Byron has submitted this stuff. I've seen the memos where you submit something to, say, the governor's
His office. Yes.
And they say,
I have a case number.
Here's your case number. Here's the record of it. We have it. Thank you very much. So I can lend credence to what he is saying right there.
Yeah, I also find it interesting that that the state has been actively engaging and pushing policies to make a sanctuary city, allowing this stuff to happen while lying to the people, saying that it's not happening. And, and again, the media, covering their tracks, preventing these type of stories to come.
NPR, I've presented this to NPR. They won't touch this, right? I talk about anything related to drugs and the FBI. Why would they cover this up? In the interview for this for the governorship, did NPR even mention a single question related to 600 dead Utahns every year that are killed by fentanyl?
The bigger question is why would they care about that when there's so much money involved? Those are normal, everyday people. It's not their family typically, and they have a purpose for this. And if you look at this, the war on drugs is billions, if not trillions of dollars. I don't know how much it is, just in between the United States and Mexico. Why would they shut that down?
Right.
And that's the question you need to ask. And so these people, whether they're government agencies or cartels or whatever, they're basically cooperating with each other. They don't like each other, but they're cooperating with each other to bring money across both ways.
Right.
And so there's no reason for them to end this. I mean, if you remember years back, Representative Ron Paul, and he was kind of a trailblazer, but he was always after ending, and he's a Texas congressman.
Yep.
He knew what was happening in his own state. And he said we need to end this war on drugs, and if we would end this, legalize certain things. And I'm not going to get into who's for what and all this stuff about legalizing things. But if you look at it and you actually put things in perspective, why are these things illegal? They're illegal so that people go to prison, so that they're worth a lot of money. And if you actually take away the ability for these guys to have a black market, well, it takes away all the money.
Can I jump over to Jason's question about the Israel contact? So. Chris Stewart says he's going to help. I wait over a year. He doesn't help. He doesn't even talk about the atomic, and he knows about it because he's on the Intel committee, right? And he won't help me stop the flow of deadly drugs into Utah. And so I send an email to Representative Jim Jordan and say, look, and luckily, Representative Chris Stewart sent an email. Maybe I can bring that up here.
Isn't Jim Jordan on the intel?
We'll put it on afterwards. We'll pull it in afterwards. Keep
Oh,
going.
okay. So I get this email from Representative Chris Stewart's office saying Chris has had extensive briefings on the tunnel monitoring project, cartel activity, and subsequent national threats to various assets. But he can't talk anymore about that. And so I sent this. Jim Jordan's office immediately gets back to me and says, oh, we want to see that letter from Chris Stewart's office right away, right? So I sent it immediately. And then about 2 months later, Chris Stewart resigns from Congress saying that his wife had some sort of illness or something like that.
Wow, interesting.
I didn't know
Right?
that's why.
Yes. And so I'm claiming, without much proof, except it was about 2 months. That's the key thing. I submit this to Jim Jordan, and as soon as I give this to Jim Jordan's office, all of my contacts with Jim Jordan just cease. He disappears. Representative Chris Stewart, he won't talk to me anymore, right? And then he resigns from Congress. So
It looks like Chris gave you more information than what was necessary for their handlers to.
Exactly.
And so they said, wrap this up.
You know, the way they look at it, he made a very serious mistake. I don't know if that's a felony, but that certainly is against the rules of the House Intel Committee to divulge such highly classified information about atomic bomb attacks on the United States.
And the tunnels.
And the tunnels. He says he's actually been to the tunnels. He's had extensive briefings about, and when we were there talking to him, yes, he knew all about the tunnels. And he knew that they were looking for the atomic bombs. He knows all about this. I can't get NPR to go and talk to him, right?
I think this is why the people are fed up with our government.
Exactly.
I mean, it's very clear that these people at all levels,
Exactly.
you know, and especially here in Utah, are
Chris-
not working for the people.
Chris Stewart, repent, come forward and tell the American people what's going on, what you've been doing, what's going on in the Intel Committee, right? This is your nation. These are your children. So the other person I met with was Carrie Ann Lisenby, right? I've gone to her office. She's the whip, the Republican whip in Utah. And I've pleaded with her. Why? Because she's a BYU grad. She's got 6 girls. Look at the number of people that are being killed in Utah because of this FBI drug flow. Please, Carrie Ann, please, I beg you, help stop this flow of deadly drugs. There are parents that are suffering and mourning the loss of their children. You think God's wrath is not going to sometime in the future hit you? I'm not threatening her, of course. But please,
This is much bigger than any of these reps, and that's the biggest thing that our listeners need to understand.
I pleaded with all of these Republicans. They're in Utah. They're all in on it. Probably, as they say, it may be one of the most politically corrupt states. But now when we get to Israel, so as I'm working with the FBI is telling me, look, we face this problem of tunnels on our border, but the Israelis have it much worse than we do. They're surrounded by enemies, and and they call them the Middle Eastern terrorist organizations hate Israel much more than they hate us. We're the big Satan, but it's Israel they want to get rid of, and all it would take would be one atomic bomb. To take the United States out, they would have to send several in before they could get us to the point of extorting the United States. But for Israel, if they could get just one small atomic bomb in through their tunnels, Israel would cease to exist in the future. No Jew would move back to Israel if they knew that the present Jews were incapable of protecting Israel against an atomic bomb attack. And all of that October 7th, that was all about preventing an atomic bomb attack on Israel. The main purpose was not attacking Israel and murdering all those Jews. It was to generate an excuse so they could go in and destroy those tunnels that were designed to pass terrorist atomic bombs into Israel. Those would be anonymous, and they would drive those bombs or that bomb into Jerusalem or Tel Aviv, blow it up, and the Israelis, how would they respond? They don't know where that bomb comes from. This is what the FBI told me and my group.
When did they tell you this?
Pardon? This
When?
was in 2007 in these initial meetings. They said, look, we cannot bring the CIA into our meetings because it's against federal law. But we talk to the CIA hours every day. There are hundreds of people looking at Israel because they believe the initial attacks are going to be on Israel. And they have hundreds of interpreters. They listen to the chatter, and they know that they're focused, and they know they've got these tunnels in Israel. So the IDF will want your expertise. So I've never talked directly, just like the FBI. The FBI, they never paid us directly. We're subcontractors to a subcontractor to a subcontractor, et cetera, et cetera. So the FBI has plausible deniability against us, right? Yeah. So for us to show our financial link to the FBI, very, very difficult unless a senator or someone or a president or Kash Patel, Kash, please come. If you're righteous, please come out here and help us. I can lay out the path of all of this corruption for you. Please come out and help us stop the murders, the FBI vile murders that are occurring here in Utah.
Across the country. It's not just Utah, right? I mean,
absolutely,
absolutely. These drugs are going.
Absolutely. So, and you asked where I got those numbers. So if you add up the number of people killed from Utah in Vietnam and Korea, it's like 840 total, men and women, during the entire wars of Korea and Vietnam, 840. In 2021, 603 Utahns died.
Wow. And that doesn't even account for the amount of homeless. These people's lives that are becoming like zombies.
Absolutely. You're allowing
because of
you're allowing all that in. And the FBI,
these tunnels again aren't just about the drugs. That's a big thing. We've obviously got the bombs that are the biggest threat.
The bombs are the biggest
drugs,
threat.
But look at the people. Look at the
it's destroying the nation.
Military age fighting men that are coming in under these tunnels. To me, that's a big concern. And we're building a wall. Who cares about the wall if there's these tunnels? Why isn't the president or some of these higher-ranking Congress people and Senate, why are they not speaking of this?
Because it's
that's
real.
What I'm saying. Here we are building a wall when we have a tunnel. So to me, that's a distraction. The wall is more of a distraction from people that just want to come and live a better life, right?
Right.
Even though there's a bunch of criminals, but the criminals are passing in the tunnels. The high-level criminals are coming in with high-level clearance into these tunnels with all types of stuff.
And when you listen to the congressional investigations, they're saying, oh, did the drugs come through the port, or did the drugs come between the ports? No, the drugs come underground through these deep tunnels.
Right.
They got railway tracks. How do you compare a few tons of drugs that can be carried by a railway system compared to some poor guy that's crawling across a border fence with 20 or 30 fentanyl pills in his back pocket?
And those are the guys that they put on the news and they arrest.
Exactly.
We caught somebody with a little bit of contraband.
Yeah. So the local
big
FBI
story about it.
The local FBI guys are saying, look, we found a guy who had 50 fentanyl tablets, right?
Yeah.
And I say, yeah, go down to the border and talk to your FBI guys there that are monitoring the border, and they've got tons that are coming across it each day. So I've also gone and visited the DEA here in Salt Lake City. I've got their names. I said, please accept my testimony about this. So because in the meetings that I had at Fort Bliss, the DEA never attended. I said, that's strange. All of these people, and they know they're bringing drugs across, but the DEA was never invited to those meetings. So I contact the Salt Lake City DEA. I've got those guys' names, right? And I tell them, look, I know the largest shipment of supplier and protector of drugs into Utah of any other organization. And they set the meeting up with me. There were about 5 DEA agents. I've got their names. Kash Patel, please come, and I'll invite you to meet them, right? And I'll invite you to meet Shohini Sinha, who's the head of the local FBI. And I've pleaded with Shohini, please expose these vile crimes of the FBI and stop the importation of these deadly drugs.
Byron, I hope you're right. I hope Cash is who he say he is. He's been in my home before, stumping for a friend of mine.
Is he real?
I hope so. You know, I've met him. I'm a good judge of character, and so I really hope that Cash is who he say he is. And I mean,
we need patriots.
I've met him a few times, and I was really excited to hear that he was going to be the nominee.
And you know, they delayed.
So I'm hoping this is real.
You know,
really
the Democrats delayed his nomination by another week.
That's why I said I hope this is a real thing, and if we can get somebody that can start really being a disruptor and bringing an end to this, because you guys, there's so much corruption at every single level of government, and it's out of control.
My biggest concern right now is Attorney General Garland. We don't want him to do an Epstein. Yeah. We need him to live, right? Yep. They need him under 24-hour protection.
Yeah, you're right. I laugh because it's true.
This is the greatest mass killer in the United States we've ever had. This guy is similar to Himmler, right? We've got a live Himmler. We need to keep him alive in order for him to describe how this whole series of crimes were committed here within the FBI. And he's got to pinpoint all these FBI agents that allowed this program to proceed. And also Ray. Ray was the FBI guy.
The question I'm sure that many of us have, that I have, is how do you root this out? Again, is Kash Patel the guy? I know it's we the people. We have to be able to stand up and be vigilant and be loud and that. But at the same time, it seems like once there are people that do, some of those people go away. Some of those people are silenced. How do we end this?
Tom, that's the question. I was hoping the military, because again, who impressed me was that military officer, because he was concerned about the United States. He impressed me and said, Mr. Arneson, we need your technical help to stop any atomic bomb coming into the United States. And I believed him.
I hope you're right.
And I thought, well, maybe there's some other patriotic people in the military that really love our nation and are willing to to risk their lives. I thought. So I went to Fort Douglas. What did they do? What did the U.S. Army do after I dedicated these years of my life to design this instrument for Israel and for here? They trespassed me.
Yeah.
So I don't think we can have a lot of faith in the U.S. Army.
Can I add one
Yes.
thing? Sorry. So Tom, you mentioned these people go away, and they either go away as in they're not alive anymore, or they go away out of fear and yeah, I don't know how to express this in the right way or articulate it correctly, but so a couple of months ago my dad was diagnosed with terminal cancer.
I'm sorry to hear that.
So this is kind of his death wish, to get this information out. Yeah, he has nothing to lose. And if they do get rid of him, he feels like, well, I accomplished my mission. And so, I just wanted to add that.
I was curious why you were coming forward, and that
There's a long story to that. So I waited. First of all, one day, as I'm working on this project, and we had about 20 engineers below us that were doing all the physical and the composition and the machining and all of the subsidiary activity. We had a big group based out near the University of California, Davis, doing most of this work. This was a big project. It was, tens of millions. And I get another call from my boss, John David Fett. And he says, Byron, he says, yeah, I know you're going to think I'm crazy, but I want you to wrap everything up today and do not invoice me one penny starting tomorrow for this FBI project.
Right.
I go, what? And he said, and this is one time he said, the Pentagon, my friends at the Pentagon have warned me that there has been some sort of payment irregularity or theft, and that they're worried that the Inspector General is going to open this up at the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, because our payment directly to us was coming through another company, but that was coming through the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the ERDC branch of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. He phones me and says, Byron, drop everything and act like you never did anything on this, because this is getting real serious. So I dropped the entire project from that time until we meet with Chris Stewart, and Chris Stewart tells us it's alive.
Yeah.
This is years later, right? And my friend and my boss had died of Parkinson's. And then the FBI said, Mr. Arneson, the way they're going to bring this bomb in is they're going to bring it in parts, and they're going to have trained experts, and they're going to have a group of experts that they'll bring in to assemble the bomb, these components. That'll be the first group, and the people in that group will have no state. They will have no fingerprints. They won't have any IID. They'll be stateless. They'll be totally unknown to our FBI, and they will assemble the bomb. But then later there'll be a second group who will be equally stateless, and their job will be to emplace the bomb and arm it. And there'll be several bombs, Chicago, New York, Houston, but the first bomb will be Fort Bliss. The FBI continued to tell me that. Because Fort Bliss is right next to the border, so all you have to do is get the bomb right next there.
They want to take out the military institution.
Fort Bliss and the oil refineries. So you look at Houston and that area where you've got the military bases in Texas and the oil refineries right there. Those are the ones they want to take out. And of course, Israel is the big one that they want to take out.
Of course.
But they said before that happens, you will see men that don't have any ties to anything. The FBI agent was telling me, he says, Byron, I think they'll probably be from Yemen, because Yemen, you don't get any birth certificate. You don't get, there is no records at all. So when I heard that Texas had captured individual men from Yemen crossing the border, that's when I first started saying, this thing must be going. And I went to Chris Stewart, asking Chris Stewart's help. And
Byron, this is fascinating to me, and I really hope our listeners are paying attention to this, because this is actually mind-boggling to me. I've known about this for a long time, but it gives a lot of credibility to it. Can you tell me really quick? Can we shift and move to tunnels in Utah? Did you have information on that? What do you know about the tunnels in Utah?
The only tunnels that I know about that I've actually visited were the heating tunnels used for downtown, and I think those were built in like the 1800s. So I've actually been inside there, and they have these old steam iron plumbing that used to, and I don't know if they still, like the tabernacle. So how do you heat the tabernacle? You have these coal plants.
Are there anything in these tunnels that we need to be worried about for Utahns, or is it just the border tunnels?
I don't know of any tunnel threat in the United States, to be absolutely, I'm sorry, I don't know of any tunnel threat in the state of Utah. Israel still has a very big continuing atomic bomb tunnel threat, but in Utah, I don't know of any threat.
Okay, so we've got our border threat,
but we do get the drugs that are coming through that are killing Utahns, right? And we have a governor that's just turning the other, ignoring all these deaths.
You have to ask yourself why. And if they're again, is it because they've been told at a high level to turn a blind eye?
Why does Fox News?
And that's what I would think.
I've gone to Fox News. I give them all this information.
Well, you're the same thing,
right? NPR.
That's why you're here today, to expose this, because these other news outlets, guess what?
Brian McElhatton.
They're not
Brian McElhatton.
They're not going to run the story.
Right. He knows the story.
Anything else that to sum up your part? And then I'd like to speak a little bit briefly with Sophie here.
Sure.
What would you like the listeners to know, just obviously with your expertise with the tunnels, the biggest concern, if you could just sum up in a minute, what would be your take for the American public here to understand about this?
These tunnels, and Israel is the canary in the mine, the typical canary in the mine. Thank God we've got those smart Jews that are looking out for us, and I will do everything I possibly can to help them, because they're taking it right on the nose. But this atomic bomb threat to Israel and the United States is the greatest threat, and you don't hear anything about this from any politician. I'm like the plumber in Auschwitz, right? I'm just a German plumber, and I put in shower heads, and I'm putting in these shower heads. And I go to the Jews, and I say, I'm just a plain old German plumber, but I think it might be interesting to you to know that all these shower heads I put in, they don't connect to the water supply. Yeah. They don't connect to the water supply. So I visited with the JCC here on the University of Utah campus. At that meeting was Shohini Sinha, the head of the FBI, Salt Lake City FBI. Trina Higgins, the federal attorney for Utah, from our federal under Attorney General Garland, right? The guy that we need to prevent from committing suicide, right? And and who else was in that meeting? Chief Michael Brown of the Salt Lake City Police Department. And during that meeting, when the question period came up, I asked them, Shohini and Trina, will you please, and I explained I was the leader of the tunnel program, geophysical leader, will you please expose and denounce these tunnel pathways that the FBI is protecting? And they said, we declined to address that question. And then after that meeting, I went up to Chief Michael Brown, and very nice. I said, Chief Brown, has the FBI briefed you as the chief of the Salt Lake City Police Department about these tunnels and the people that have been killed by their free passage into the state of Utah? He said, no, your discussion about this is the very first I've heard about this.
See, that's the problem.
Then, of course, we also had our meeting with Sam Gill.
Right. Well,
so
at every level, you're seeing this from the top to
they
the
won't
bottom.
touch it, right?
There are people that are untouchable,
and the news organizations won't touch it,
right? So, honestly, this has been very enlightening. I read, some of the information prior, and I thought this is going to be fascinating. But hearing you speak about it, talking about your credentials, what you've invented, I mean, this is it's fascinating to hear this and to lend credibility to one of the biggest problems we've got in the United States. And if you're right, if that is the case, if they're bringing in these bombs and dirty bombs, then that is an existential threat to our entire country, our civilization.
And what the FBI said they would do is they would bring as many bombs as they could, and then they would one day, they would just randomly set off 1 or 2 bombs. They would destroy Fort Bliss.
Who's going to set them off?
Well, that's that second group that arms them and
right. But are you talking these are potentially Yemenis? Are they? Who are these people? Do you think?
Whoever,
because they're led by somebody, right? Is this a deep state operation? Obviously,
the FBI said these are radical Muslims who believe that the earth should be controlled by the Muslim faith, and they've got billions of dollars. So, paying the northern drug cartels of Mexico few tens of millions and buying a few atomic bombs from Pakistan is turkey feed.
So we're allowing the cartels and the Muslim Brotherhood or whoever it is that's coming in here to run these things. And again, why are we not doing something about it?
And they'll set a few bombs off, then they'll send a letter to the White House and say, we'd like you to send $100 billion cash to Iran, for example. And if they don't get it in 3 days, we're going to blow up Long Island.
Yeah.
That's what's going to happen. So their ultimate purpose is to control the United States and extort the United States. And with several atomic bombs, they can do it. And interesting, Tom, this is the same exact situation the Japanese faced during World War II.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
They didn't know how many bombs we had ready to drop on Japan.
I don't think they truly knew what the extent of damage was going to be either.
Absolutely.
Until it was done.
Until it happened.
Yep. Well, listen, I appreciate you coming on, Byron. Very, very credible. Appreciate you, and I think it's very valiant, very brave. Appreciate your vigilance in this, and
if I can stop it, it will be my life's desire. According to Huntsman, the top guys at Huntsman, I have no more than a few weeks. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I'm really sorry.
According to them,
well, listen, if I'm a betting man, I'd bet on what God wants for you.
Thank you.
Don't listen to those guys and think positive. Okay?
If there are some patriotic military men out there, some real policemen that want to protect the United States, or a politician, please, we need your help. Kash Patel, if you're really righteous, come on out here, meet with me. I'll introduce you to these people that are committing these crimes. And you need to protect Attorney General Garland. And you need to go in immediately and get Ray before either he's suicided or he really does commit suicide. We need these guys. We can't let them kill them. We can't allow them to Epstein themselves.
Again, let me sum this up. Jason had to step out, and so I'm going to finish it up here, whether he likes it or not. And I've been enlightened. I hope you have been with the information that we've heard here. And it's really good to know that there are true patriots, people that actually want to come forward, do the right thing, and try to save this idea called the United States and the amazing experiment that it has been. And we really hope that it continues for a while. There are so many patriots out there, and I get the sense that there are more than we know of, but there's just a lot of them that are silent because they don't want the repercussions. It's not the popular thing to do currently, but I have a feeling that it's going to become more popular as folks like you step up and they see that. It gives somebody else courage to step up and to say things, to do things, and it could just be small little acts, and that becomes the popular thing to do throughout the United States. It hasn't been that way the last little while, but it will be. And so, but that's the reason for the show, guys. That's the reason we do this show, is so we can expose things that most people won't know. We are not the mainstream media. We know that the majority of the mainstream media is bought and paid for. Yeah. They have handlers. We do not. We're here to bring you something that we want to bring as much credibility to our show as we possibly can within this little community that we call Utah. And hopefully it has a larger outreach amongst some of the nation, and hopefully some of our reps will see this, and we will continue to help push for those reps, for the governor. And, the best thing we can do is get these guys that don't want to do anything, get them out of office. We need to search for, better ways to have better elections so we can actually get the officials that should win in instead of who they want to win, instead of selected, they're elected. That's a big deal.
No more illegitimate elections.
Nope. And we know that happens. It happens everyone says, it happened in Venezuela, it happened in, South America or China. You guys, it's happening in the United States. I don't care who you are, open your eyes. It's happening everywhere. I'm not saying it's happening on every election, but it's happening in a lot of key elections. And that is key to us retaining this republic, not this democracy, this republic. And like Benjamin Franklin said, if we could just keep it. And so, I believe that, I was born to defend it. And I'm one of those guys that stands boldly for it. And I appreciate the patriotism and the honesty and what This has been very enlightening. So with that said, thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I hope that you'll do your own research on this and start to talk to your congressmen, talk to your senators, talk to your local police about things like this. And let's open the eyes of the general public as what's happening with these tunnels and all of the theft and drugs and bombs that are coming through these tunnels.
Hill Air Force Base is on their list. And these oil refineries in near Salt Lake City, those are on the list.
That's true. We have
the FBI told me the top is the military bases. Just below that are all of the major oil refineries in the United States. So for Utahns to think they're going to escape just because it's on the border of Texas, they're mistaken. They're going to hit Hill Air Force Base.
Byron has brought up a good point. In some of the memos that he sent, there was Utah is a battleground. It always has been, and so we do have a lot of refineries. We've got
and
defense here.
Of course, the governor is totally ignoring that, right?
I don't know that he's ignoring it. I think he's complicit. There's a difference.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
If you're the governor, you're briefed on everything, and if you're ignoring this, then you are complicit. So that said, guys, thank you again for joining us. Make sure to click and subscribe here on the newsletter for We Are the People. And we really appreciate you both for coming on. Sophie, Byron, thank you. May God bless the United States of America. God bless you.
Thank you.